Lady Gertrude, is this thing working?
What is this blasphemy?
Oh, I don't know.
I believe you pressed the red button, Lady Abigail.
Oh, red button! Oh, I see! There we are!
We
Look
our
at faces.
Camera.
Oh, so fancy.
Indeed. Well, let me tell our audience why we are all here. This here is Lady Abigail.
How do you do?
And I am Lady Gertrude, and we are here in the time of 2013. Can you believe it?
Never thought.
2013. Because these two beautiful young ladies traveled to our time period of 1597 and asked us if we would come back with them to the year 2013 to create a video blog entry for their theatre history course, I believe, for their Professor Dr. Schmidt.
We have not met her yet, but we have heard very wonderful things.
Perhaps we can get a spot of tea with this Dr.
Oh,
Schmidt. That would be lovely.
Oh, Lady Schmidt, we can induct her.
Oh, yes, indeed. Anyway, let's
Great.
get on to today's festivities as we explain to you the theatre.
Yes, we shall and we shall. We are here today because we were brought back from the future, as she said, to explain to you what theatre was like during the Renaissance. Oh, well, what you guys know is the Renaissance. I mean, we didn't really know it was the Renaissance, but that's okay. And we are also going to talk to you about a theatre-going experience that we have had ourselves.
Indeed, we're going to give an account of the cultural importance of the theatre and explain to you what the theatre really looked like from our point of view.
Very much so. We saw the play that we are going to be talking about in 1597, and it was one of the very first productions of Romeo and Juliet, performed by the acting troupe of Lord Chamberlain's men. And the play itself was written by some fellow named Shakespeare, I think.
Oh, sister, no, his name was Shakespeare.
Well, Shakespeare? What kind of silly name is that?
Oh, I don't know, but his name was William Shakespeare, I recall.
Well, anywho, the play was written by William Shakespeare, who was also a part of this acting troupe of the Lord Chamberlain's men.
Yes, he was, and if I recall correctly, Master Shakespeare was a lead actor of the Lord Chamberlain's men before he decided to become a more prominent playwright in the year 1592.
Yes, she's absolutely right, and he was rather good too, I believe.
He was, and if I remember correctly, Ashley and Roxy did mention that in total, William Shakespeare wrote 38 plays.
Oh, goodness, that's a lot.
It's a lot of plays indeed.
And I think he got a lot of his subjects based off other stories like myths and religious stories, perhaps? I don't know.
And a lot of his characters had very advanced characterization, and there was a deep plot line for most of his work.
Very much so, and he always set out the action of his play in the very first act.
He did indeed. So,
where were we?
Let's get back on track.
Oh, yes, we were going on about Mr. Shakespeare. Anyways, it was a very awkward time for theatre during this time. And when our Queen Elizabeth came into power, she changed a lot of the way theatre was. And one of her first decisions was declaring the necessity for a license, as well as banning any plays with religious or political subjects in about 1558, I believe.
Indeed, and to be quite frank, I personally approved of such a change. I think that the cycle plays were quite atrocious and rather boring and lengthy. So this eventually eliminated the cycle plays that the Romans had put into effect before, and with the need of licenses in 1572, she had significantly limited the number of acting troupes and the number of productions in and around London.
Very true. And eventually there are only two acting troupes that really dominated the theatre scene, and that was the Lord Chamberlain's men, who we previously mentioned, and then there was the Lord Admiral's men.
Indeed. And in 1574, Her Highness, shortly after making the previous requirement of a license, appointed a Master of the Revels.
Yes.
The Master of the Revels. The Master of the Revels was directly in charge of all theatre experiences and communicated any action of the theatre and the playhouses directly to the Queen. The Master of Revels was in charge of when the playhouses opened, when they closed, what type of productions the playhouses were able to put on, and he also granted licenses. He had ultimate control of the theatre.
Very true. However, some people always found a way around the law. There were many acting troupes who would travel and try to perform things anyways without a license. And to get into bigger cities, they would create fake licenses in order to get a better audience.
Indeed, and these traveling troupes would pack up their things on a wagon and head out to the next city and unload and do a show in the Times Square, and it was a wonderful experience. And the lot were rather good. We personally live right outside of London, so we're always encountering several acting troupes that come by, and they're fascinating, simply fascinating.
Very much so, and they're sneaky little boogers too.
Yes, indeed. And with all this going on, the theatre was going through a lot of ups and downs in this time period.
Very much so. The theatre experiences we can recall seeing Romeo and Juliet occurred 2 years after the play was actually written and was performed by the troops of the Lord Chamberlain's men at the Curtain Theatre, which was its temporary home.
Oh, the Curtain Theatre. Let's tell them about the Curtain Theatre, shall we?
Yes.
The Curtain Theatre held a lot of spectators. There were usually queues outside the theatre for hours before the curtain would actually come up, and it was a very busy public playhouse. Oftentimes, not everybody was granted admissions. The peasants were admitted at a lower cost and were required to stand for the entirety of the show in a section called the pit.
Yes, very much so. And because the things were so long sometimes that they would just stand there and it would get very stinky, and it was just like a herd of cattle, and it was
not a pleasant experience for the peasants, I assure you. And the theatre itself had a thrust stage, and all the people would be seated around it. And the people with the higher income and the higher classes would be seated in the gallery seating on top of the theatre.
Very much so. And of course, the theatre was usually a circular shape to get a better view, and each people in the gallery, there was about 3 sections, and usually they were divided by class.
Indeed. And let's talk about the main stage, shall we?
Oh, yes, of course.
There wasn't very much spectacle in our time period, you see. Not many sets and set designs. Because if you think about it, a lot of these troops were traveling, and they had to make it easily accessible for them to take their sets with them. So instead, the main stage only came with a trapdoor and was held by 2 large pillars, and when the actors would enter the stage, they would announce to the audience where exactly their scene was taking place.
Yes, very true. I would try to get a lot of the context in the very first scene.
Indeed. The most important part of these theatres were the costumes. Tell them about the
very much so.
sister.
They were always very elaborate and had a lot of decoration. In fact, it was probably the most spectacle thing out of the whole entire production.
Indeed, the costumes were absolutely beautiful.
Very much.
Well, I have to be honest, though. This play wasn't exactly what I expected.
No, very much. It was boring and very wordy. Mr. Shakespeare was not very good, really. We thought he was just...
It was quite adequate, really. I was expecting more of a comedy, but, I mean, I did appreciate the romance. Tell them what the plot was like.
Oh, very true. The plot itself was about 2 star-crossed lovers who meet at the very beginning of the play and fall in love immediately. However, both of their families were feuding, so they try to find a way to get together.
Oh, let's not tell them the ending, though. It'll be a surprise. I know none of you really have seen Romeo and Juliet, so we don't want to spoil it for you.
True.
But I do have to say, I did enjoy Romeo and Juliet a tad more than Thomas Kyd's The Spanish Tragedy.
I agree with you to an extent. But I'm not as versed in the theatre as you are, so I really don't...
Sister, if you can't find me at home, I say, I'm always at the playhouses.
This is true. She gets in a lot of trouble there.
I do. It is such a fun and exciting experience. I'm so looking forward to the changes that are to come. One thing that I must complain about, though, sister, is the fact that women are not allowed to act.
Oh, this is very true, and we had a problem with this. We thought it was quite blasphemous, because we think we'd be very good actors.
I mean, I mean, seriously, I think that the young boy who was playing Juliet, well, I don't think he did a very good job at all because his voice was getting deep, he
No.
was.
Very much so. I think they're just jealous. I think that they know we can do a better job of playing women, so they just don't want to feel threatened.
Perhaps in the future, sister, they will have women actors as well.
If I recall correctly, I think Ashley told us that they had.
Oh, the future seems
Yes.
like a fun place indeed. Perhaps we'll stay a little bit longer here.
I don't want to go there.
I don't either. Well, until next time, we'll tell you about our other play experiences. Have a wonderful class, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye, Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Sissy.
Yes.
Oh.